Hello Piccolo players! Today I'm going to go through the Mother Goose Suite by Ravel, which as we know has a huge piccolo part. The part also is combined with flute too, so there's many prominent flute two solos as well that you should be aware of. But in this video I'm just going to go over the main piccolo solos. So I'm going to cover movements 2, 3, and 4. And let's get started right with movement 2, which is Petit Poussé, which translates to, I believe, tom thumb. First thing you play is one measure after rehearsal 5. We come in with these C's that are flutter tongue. It should sound like the sound of the birds in the forest or some kind of murmuring something probably in the forest. You're evoking a backdrop for fairy tale. The rhythm here, it is like da da, but it's never played that way. As far as I've ever heard, that first note that's flutter tongued always seems to be held a little longer, probably to facilitate the flutter tonguing, to make sure that speaks. So I always play it like that too, just to, keep the tradition alive. So a little longer, and you can spend some time on the flutter tonguing. The flutter tonguing, I always do with my throat. Because I cannot roll my R's. I've never learned how to roll my R's, so I don't do flutter tonguing with my tongue. But I think in this case, this serves me well because the flutter tonguing with your throat is a little bit more contained sounding, and it sounds really well with this particular piece. It should have a delicate quality to it. So if you're flutter tonguing with your tongue, it can tend to sound really spread out and sound like some crazy Varese modern piece. So I would, if you can do both, I would opt for the throat flutter tonguing. It just keeps it contained, like I said, and it just sounds prettier. So, and also I'm doing an alternate fingering on the C. It just has a nicer tone quality and it raises the pitch a little bit so you don't have to worry about lipping up. So for the C, I am doing in the left hand, no thumb, and then 1, 2, 3. And then the first finger in the right hand and the third finger in the right hand, the ring finger, and pinky. I sit down in it a little bit because the intonation is a little higher. There's regular C. That's your first entrance, very delicate. The next big thing you do is at rehearsal 7, and this beautiful solo should be all in one breath. So if you can't make the breath, you're probably playing it too loud and or using too much air. It's also in unison with the cellist, which is very helpful when you're playing it in real life rather than in an audition. So you can look at the cellist if you have eyesight to them and watch their bowing for the phrasing. You can actually see their vibrato in the left hand and match that. Barely made it. So it is quite difficult with the intonation, but that first entrance, the G is usually sharp, and I think mine was, but just that first entrance on the first G, keep it as tiny as possible. Your embouchure and the aperture, very tiny, and you need to practice that entrance, because if you come in stumbling into the scene, where if that first G cracks or something like that, it's in middle register, it's easy for those notes to crack. You need to practice the entrance. So 1 before 7, if you count yourself in 1, 2, just practice coming in, or even just that G. I know exactly where this needs to be for the first G to just speak. It doesn't have to project like a big soloistic thing. It's a color with the cellist. For me, the problem area is the second measure of the solo going from the G down to the C. The G is usually sharp, and then the C is flat, and then to make matters worse, my tone quality on the C is very different than the G. It's more open, rounded. It sounds like a recorder or something. So I have to spend a lot of time from the G when I drop down to the C, first of all, to not feel like I'm dropping down, but to make it as smooth as possible, and also for my C to feel like it has the same resistance of air as my G does. I'm just spending a lot of time making all my notes kind of feel real smooth and matching in tone quality. The crescendos and decrescendos are important, and again, when you're playing it with a cellist in an orchestra, you don't have to do so much. You can let the cellist really do the crescendo. You don't want to crescendo too much regardless, because it's easy to lose the center of your note, and then you can't really regain it back, or you lose your sense of intonation. But the decrescendo is important, I think, really coming down. Plus also, if you do a really nice decrescendo, it gives the illusion that there was a crescendo beforehand, even though you maybe didn't do very much of one. So I'm just going to play this one more time. And just practice this always with your tuner on. And just see which notes tend to be pretty out. For me, it's that G, and then my C's are flat and my D's are sharp. So I'm just constantly trying to, of course, keep it all pretty even. But rather than thinking about the needle being completely straight up at 440 for those notes, I do look at that, but I try really to hear the sound quality of each note so that they match. That's the most important thing, I think, for this type of solo. And then the next movement, the third movement, the Empress of the Pagodas. This is the main solo that is often asked on orchestra auditions. It's pretty tricky. It can feel a little clumsy because of the awful key signature. And also, again, it's in the middle to the low register, which can be a little difficult to make it sound clean. I would spend, for this whole piece, actually, I would spend a good amount of time just warming up and practicing in the low register. And I did a video on the exercises I use to give extra attention to the low register, and I'll put the link to that video in the description. You might want to check that out. Okay, so you come in at rehearsal 1. The one thing I would say, make sure for all your A sharps that you're using the thumb B flat. It's awkward enough. You don't want to be doing this 1 and 1 for all the A sharps. It's way too glitchy sounding. For me, the main thing is not to overplay it, not to spread the tone color, and keep it contained. And some of the notes that are difficult is when you go down to the low D sharp, 5 measures in. And I always have to practice getting down there and reminding myself what my embouchure needs to be doing, which is being very loose, and what the aperture is, which is still small. You don't have to open up the aperture and really drop down. Like, I think because we do that a lot on the flute, we kind of try to honk out low notes all the time, myself included. Sometimes we carry that over to the piccolo, and if you try to ya-da-da-da-da-da-da-ha on the piccolo, it'll sound terrible. It's just going to be all air and sound gross, or nothing will come out. So I think you need to keep, like, the slur that goes down to that low D sharp, keep the air the same, and then the low D sharp, you just sort of drop it in there. Everything's very relaxed down there. You can also practice just tonguing Ds, like finding a good D sharp. Another thing, the air should really connect all the notes with a good amount of resistance going down. So that is really connecting all those notes. This solo can often sound kind of uneven, or just a little, a little uneven. And what I do to try to help myself smooth it out and be more even is to tongue it all, which is difficult, of course, but or just maybe take a little section like that one section I've been playing and tongue it. And just that, when you tongue something like that, a technical passage, if you can do it tongued, that means your finger combinations are perfectly changing at the right times. When you slur, the finger combinations it's a little more forgiving, and you might be going A sharp to C sharp slightly faster than G sharp to A sharp, and you're just not aware. But when you tongue it, all those things become very aware. So I just take, and even you just take the beginning doing that same thing. So I'm going to run this one more time. So I just a few things to summarize, or that what I'm thinking about while I'm playing is keep all the 16th notes even, of course. My 3 low D sharps to be loose in the embouchure and have as centered as possible a tone quality. That's what I'm aiming for anyway. And then when I get to the rehearsal 2, the 2 F sharps, not to be too sharp. Those F sharps just bump, and then resetting for the middle F sharp. And overall, I mean, there's so many intonation things to think about, but really the character should come through. I think that's the most important thing. And then at rehearsal 7, this is tricky. You're in unison with the principal flute, and it should sound very simple, even though it's difficult. What I do, and make sure you start very, very soft. You have a long way to go. And I, again, would use the thumb B flat on for all the A sharps. You definitely don't want to be doing this cross-fingering stuff. But what I do for this continuous pattern is when I, F sharp, A sharp, F sharp. When I get to the G sharps, I always just leave my F sharp finger down for everything. So the only thing, when you play the middle G sharp with this down, the G sharp's going to be flat. So I just very subtly kind of lip up the G sharp every time I get to it. Not you don't want to be doing things like, you don't want to be doing that. But I'm just sort of I'm thinking the G sharp's just a little higher, because I have this finger that just stays down. So I'll just do it really slow once, so you can see that this finger stays down. So hopefully you can see that. So that's what I'm doing. It has a crescendo as you go through. I usually don't bother with the crescendo. I just try to stay steady all the way through until you get to the last 4 measures at the bottom of the page, and then it feels safe, and then I play loud until I get to the end. And that last F sharp, I always do this one. It's a little sharp, but in this case, I think it's okay. It just sounds brighter. It's a brighter sounding F sharp, and it's really easy to speak. So I'll just barely tongue it, and it comes out. So it's like a regular F sharp in the left hand, where you have thumb and then first and third, and then in the right hand, it's the middle 2 here, middle finger and ring finger, and the pinky. No pinky. Yeah, no pinky. So there was towards the beginning, it seems like I wasn't totally 100% even. So I would go through and practice it again, tongued, going. Maybe just 2 measures at a time, and then go back and slur it. So that's a way you can practice it, getting all the way through there. Okay, so that's it for that movement. And then in the last movement, or the 4th movement, after rehearsal 6, you have, after a big violin solo, you come in, piccolo comes in, it's very delicate, and again, that middle to low register. In order for it to sound as magical as possible, the intonation really needs to be as perfect as possible, but also try to keep the sense of a phrase. And because we're so concerned about our intonation, it's easy for us to kind of think one note at a time, like D, bring down, C, bring up, F, okay, A, bring up, so just, I always have to remind myself just to keep the phrase moving forward. That last A, I usually play no vibrato when I hit it. It just, sometimes I do and sometimes I don't. And I think it just depends which orchestra I'm in or who the principal flute player is, or just kind of what I feel like at the moment, honestly. It's beautiful either way. A good middle ground is hitting that first A half note, no vibrato, and then the principal flute will come in, y'all, and they'll usually add a little vibrato, and you can add a little vibrato to match. And then as you're holding it, I just straighten out my A, and then the first flute comes in with their A. Hopefully you're in tune. And as you both crescendo, usually will add vibrato to make the sound really warm. And then as you're decrescendoing, you can straighten out your vibrato, no vibrato, so that you can do a really nice diminuendo and fade out to nothing. One thing you could do as you're fading out, or for the whole A, if your A is too flat, if you start on your A and it's too flat right from the get-go, you can just put down this pinky, the A flat key. You just have to be really careful not to put down your ring finger, otherwise you're going to hit an A flat. So here's A, and if you just put down the A flat key, it opens it up a key in the back and just brings the pitch up a little bit so that you have a fighting chance to get through the whole rest. Or again, like the very end, rallentando, to really help to do a nice fade out your A. And sometimes I'll just, if I feel like my A is sinking, I just open up the back key, and it just helps the pitch come up a little bit. So yeah, with this solo, again, like similar to the first solo we went over, that drop in the interval, trying to keep everything as smooth, so, and you don't want like a big drop down there. Just keep everything as smooth as if it were all just half steps, but it's not, and that the tone quality is matching. And you just practice hitting that A right in tune. All right, so those are the main parts for the piccolo in this piece. And it's really such a great piece where the piccolo can sound melodic and beautiful in that middle to low register. You just have to spend a lot of time warming up down in that register and trying not to overblow and keeping your tone centered and clear with a beautiful vibrato. All right, so I hope these tips that I went over and advice, etc., was helpful. If you did find it helpful, press subscribe, and then you'll be in the loop for future videos. And also, if anyone has a request of a piece that you're working on, or for an audition or something you want me to do a practice guide similar to what I did for this one, just put the name of the piece down in the comments, and I will definitely run through a practice guide on that piece. Okay? Thanks for watching.